The cold marble stairs tasted like pennies and regret. As I lay there bleeding out, my skull fractured, the last thing I saw was Naomi's designer heels. The roommate I had tried to save. The woman who had just pushed me to my death because my own success reminded her of the future she had thrown away. I closed my eyes, praying for the dark oblivion to take me. Instead, I woke up to the smell of cheap vanilla perfume and the sound of Naomi shrieking in our cramped dorm bathroom, holding a plastic stick with 2 pink lines. This time, I wouldn't say a word. The transition from dying to living is not a peaceful one. It feels like being dragged backward through a wind tunnel. 1 second, my vision was swimming in a pool of my own dark blood, the agonizing crunch of my spine echoing in my ears. And the next, I was inhaling a sharp, panicked breath of air that smelled faintly of stale pizza and aerosol hairspray. I bolted upright, my hands flying to the back of my head. No blood, no shattered bone, just my messy ponytail and the familiar, lumpy mattress of my junior year dorm room at Boston University. Chloe, wake up! Look! The voice hit me like a physical blow. I blinked against the harsh fluorescent light buzzing overhead. Standing in the doorway of our shared microscopic bathroom was Naomi Miller. She looked exactly as she had 3 years ago. Before the madness, before the hollowed-out cheeks and the frantic, dead eyes. She was 21, vibrant, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a silk robe she couldn't afford. In her trembling hand, she thrust a plastic pregnancy test toward my face. 2 glaring pink lines. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I remembered this exact moment. It was a Tuesday in late October. The day my previous life began its slow, agonizing descent into a living hell, culminating in my murder. In my past life, when Naomi showed me that test, I had reacted with the fierce, protective instinct of a best friend. I knew who the father was. Harrison Croft, heir to the Croft Industries real estate empire. A man whose family was notorious for their ruthless, borderline sociopathic business tactics and their impenetrable high society circle. Harrison had treated Naomi like a disposable weekend toy. Back then, I had begged her to think rationally. I told her that a man like Harrison wouldn't be trapped by a pregnancy. I warned her that his family would chew her up and spit her out. I held her hand, crying with her, and eventually convinced her that she had her whole life ahead of her, a brilliant marketing degree in the works, and that she didn't need to tie herself to a monster. She had listened, albeit resentfully, but from that day on, a seed of bitter resentment took root in her heart. Whenever she faced a setback, a failed exam, a bad job interview, a breakup, she blamed me. She convinced herself that I had forced her to throw away her golden ticket to becoming a billionaire's wife out of sheer jealousy. That delusion festered for 3 years. It grew like a tumor until the night of my promotion party at a top-tier consulting firm. Naomi, drunk, broke, and consumed by spite, confronted me at the top of the restaurant stairs. "It should have been me," she had hissed, her eyes wide with madness. "You stole my life, Chloe." And then, she shoved me. Now, staring at those same 2 pink lines, the phantom pain in my spine flared. A brutal reminder of the reward I got for saving her life. "Well?" Naomi demanded, her eyes glittering with a toxic mix of panic and wild, unadulterated ambition. "Say something. It's Harrison's. I'm pregnant with a Croft." I looked at her face, really looked at it. I saw the greed dancing behind her pupils. She wasn't scared of being a young mother. She was vibrating with the thrill of a lottery winner who had just scratched off the grand prize. She honestly believed this was her key to penthouses, private jets, and limitless black cards. A cold, unfamiliar calm washed over me. The Chloe who cared, the Chloe who would sacrifice her own peace of mind for this girl, had died on those marble stairs. I forced my facial muscles to lift into a wide, brilliant smile. "Oh my God, Naomi," I gasped, keeping my voice light and breathless. "A baby? With Harrison? Naomi, this is incredible." Her shoulders dropped, the tension leaving her body as a smug, triumphant grin spread across her face. "Right? That's what I thought. I was freaked out for a second, but then I realized this changes everything. He's going to have to take me seriously now. I'm carrying the Croft heir. You absolutely are, I agreed smoothly, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I felt a slight tremor in my hands and quickly masked it by reaching for my water bottle. What are you going to do? How are you going to tell him? I'm not going to just tell him over a text. Naomi scoffed, tossing the plastic stick onto her desk like a trophy. She walked over to her closet, pulling out a handful of clothes. I need to look perfect. I need him to see the mother of his child. Oh my God, Chloe. I'm going to be set for life. I need to go shopping. I can't wear Zara when I tell a billionaire he's going to be a father. You deserve the best, I said, the words tasting like ash, though my tone was perfectly supportive. You should definitely celebrate. I knew you'd understand. She ran over and hugged me. I stiffened, the smell of her vanilla perfume making me want to gag. We are going to be living so large, Chloe. I'll make sure you get to come to all the parties. I can't wait, I whispered over her shoulder, as she pulled away and began frantically swiping through her phone, likely checking her credit card limits. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I gripped the edges of the sink, staring at my pale reflection in the mirror. My chest heaved as I finally let the facade drop. I didn't stop her. The realization was a heavy, intoxicating weight in my gut. I wasn't going to warn her about Victoria Croft, Harrison's terrifying mother, who treated people like chess pieces. I wasn't going to tell her that the Crofts employed ex-intelligence officers as fixers to handle inconveniences like pregnant college flings. I wasn't going to warn her that a baby wouldn't secure her a wedding ring, but rather a gilded cage and a lifetime of psychological torture. She wanted the life of a billionaire's plaything. She could have it. Every single agonizing second of it. This time, I was going to secure my own future, and I was going to watch Naomi Miller orchestrate her own destruction. Over the next 2 weeks, our dorm room transformed into a monument to Naomi's delusions. The first thing to go was her common sense. The second was her bank account balance. Convinced that she was weeks away from moving into Harrison's sprawling penthouse in the Back Bay, Naomi began spending money with a terrifying manic energy. She maxed out 2 student credit cards and took out a high-interest payday loan just to afford a real Gucci belt, a pair of red-soled Louboutins that she could barely walk in, and a suspiciously pristine vintage Chanel flap bag she found on a resale site. You have to dress for the life you want, Chloe, she told me one afternoon, painting her nails a deep blood red. She had skipped her macroeconomics midterm that morning. When I gently pointed out that failing the class might delay her graduation, she had laughed in my face. Graduation? Chloe, please. Do you think Victoria Beckham cared about her GPA? Harrison is going to take care of everything. I'm going to be managing a household staff, not sitting in a cubicle. You're so right, I replied seamlessly, looking up from my laptop. It's a completely different world. I was currently deep into researching internship applications. In my past life, I had spent so much time managing Naomi's emotional breakdowns over Harrison that I missed the deadline for the premier summer analyst program at Vanguard Capital. I ended up settling for a mediocre role that set my career back by 2 years. Not this time. My resume was polished. My cover letters were aggressive. And my focus was absolute. Have you actually spoken to him yet? I asked casually, tapping my pen against the desk. Harrison. Naomi's hand paused, a momentary flicker of annoyance crossing her features before the smug mask slid back into place. He's been incredibly busy. Mergers and acquisitions, you know how it is. But I left a message with his executive assistant, and I sent him a beautifully worded letter to his private residence. A letter? I suppressed a dark chuckle. In the billionaire echelon, sending an unsolicited letter to a private residence wasn't romantic. It was considered a security breach. Harrison's team of fixers had probably already intercepted it, scanned it for anthrax, and filed it away in a dossier labeled potential extortion threats. I'm sure he'll be thrilled when he finally reads it, I said. A few days later, the cracks in Naomi's fantasy began to show, though she refused to see them. I was packing my bags, I had found a small, affordable studio apartment in Somerville. It was a longer commute to campus, but I needed to get out of the blast radius. When the Crofts finally dropped the hammer on Naomi, I didn't want any of my belongings caught in the crossfire. "You're moving out?" Naomi asked, leaning against the doorframe, watching me fold my sweaters. She looked slightly offended. "Right when things are about to get amazing for me? I need the quiet to focus on my internships, Naomi. You know I'm an anxious studier." I lied smoothly. "Besides, once Harrison moves you into his place, I'd have to find a new roommate anyway. This just gets ahead of the curve." That placated her. She smiled, touching her still flat stomach. "That's true. It'll probably happen by the end of the month. He's hosting the Croft Foundation annual gala next Friday. I'm going." My hands stopped moving. I looked up. "The gala? He invited you?" "I don't need an invitation, Chloe. I'm carrying his child," she stated, as if this was an undeniable law of physics. "I bought a dress. It cost me my entire semester's textbook budget, but it's worth it. I'm going to walk in there, look him in the eye, and give him the good news face to face. It'll be so romantic. Like a movie." My blood ran cold. Not out of fear for her, but out of sheer awe at the magnitude of her stupidity. The Croft Foundation Gala wasn't a frat party you could just walk into. It was a heavily guarded fortress of Boston's elite, crawling with politicians, titans of industry, and the paparazzi. Showing up uninvited to ambush an heir with a pregnancy claim was tantamount to social suicide. It was the exact kind of public spectacle the Croft family despised above all else. "That sounds unforgettable," I managed to say. "It will be," she preened. "Oh, and guess what? I found a +1 ticket online. Someone was selling their table seat for $500. I bought it for you." I blinked. "For me?" "Yeah." She beamed, completely ignorant to the financial ruin she was hurling herself into. "I need my best friend there to hold my purse while I go talk to my future mother-in-law. Consider it a thank you for being so supportive." I looked at the printed QR code ticket she placed on my bed. In my past life, I would have burned it, locked her in the room, and physically prevented her from making the biggest mistake of her life. But looking at her now, vibrating with toxic arrogance, the memory of her shoving me down a flight of marble stairs flashed behind my eyes. "Thank you, Naomi," I said softly, slipping the ticket into my wallet. I wouldn't miss this for the world. The Waldorf Astoria Grand Ballroom was a masterclass in aggressive opulence. Thousands of crystal shards dripped from the ceiling chandeliers, casting a fractured icy light over a sea of designer tuxedos and couture gowns. The air smelled of expensive orchids, vintage champagne, and old, unforgiving money. I stood near the perimeter of the room, clutching a flute of sparkling water dressed in a tasteful, understated navy slip dress I had found at a consignment shop. I had arrived 30 minutes early, sliding through security with the legitimate ticket Naomi had procured. My goal was simple: blend into the wallpaper and secure a front row seat to the carnage. 10 minutes into the cocktail hour, the heavy oak doors at the entrance swung open, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. Victoria Croft had arrived. She was a woman carved from marble and steel. In her late 50s, with sharp, aristocratic features and silver hair pulled into a flawless chignon, she wore a bespoke emerald gown that commanded absolute authority. Beside her was Harrison. He was undeniably handsome, with the kind of lazy, cruel charm that only came from a lifetime of never hearing the word no. He looked bored, his eyes scanning the room with mild distaste, and then I saw the flash of red. Entering through the side doors, looking like a fire engine crashing into a funeral, was Naomi. I actually winced. The dress she had spent her textbook money on was a catastrophe. It was cherry red, covered in cheap sequins, with a plunging neckline and a slit that went dangerously high. In a dimly lit college club, it might have been sexy. Here, among the understated elegance of Boston's billionaire class, it was screamingly tacky. She looked exactly like what she was: an interloper desperate for attention. Naomi didn't notice the icy stares or the subtle whispers as she strutted across the room. Her eyes were locked on Harrison like a heat-seeking missile. I drifted closer, slipping behind a towering floral arrangement just a few feet away from the Croft family's inner circle. "Harrison!" Naomi's voice cut through the low, refined hum of the ballroom. It was entirely too loud. Several heads snapped in her direction. Harrison stiffened, his glass of scotch pausing halfway to his mouth. When he turned and saw her, the color drained from his face, replaced instantly by a look of sheer, unadulterated fury. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, stepping forward quickly to intercept her, trying to keep his voice down. Naomi smiled, a wide, triumphant expression, completely misreading his panic. She reached out and grabbed his arm, pressing herself against him. "Surprise! I told you I needed to see you. I couldn't wait any longer. Are you insane?" Harrison muttered, prying her fingers off his tuxedo jacket as if she were carrying a disease. "Security is supposed to keep trash like you out. Leave. Now." Naomi's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. But her delusion was armor-plated. "Don't be mad, Harry. I know this is sudden, but I have the most amazing news. News that changes everything." She pitched her voice up, ensuring that the people standing nearby, including his mother, could hear. "Harrison, darling." A voice sliced through the air, sharp as a guillotine blade. Victoria Croft stepped forward. The crowd parted for her instantly. She looked Naomi up and down, her eyes lingering on the cheap sequins, and the manic gleam in the girl's eyes. It was a look of pure clinical dissection. "Who is this colorful person?" Victoria asked, her tone entirely devoid of warmth. Harrison swallowed hard. "No one, Mother. A mistake. Security is handling it." "I am not a mistake!" Naomi declared, puffing out her chest, turning her attention to the matriarch. She actually extended a hand. "I'm Naomi Miller. I'm Harrison's girlfriend." "Well, more than that now." Victoria did not take her hand. She merely stared at it until Naomi awkwardly lowered it. "Is that so?" "My son has a terrible habit of picking up strays, Miss Miller. But they rarely follow him home." "I'm not a stray," Naomi shot back, her voice trembling slightly now. She placed both hands flat over her stomach. "The ultimate trump card. I'm pregnant. With Harrison's baby. I'm carrying your grandchild." A dead silence fell over the immediate vicinity. Even the string quartet playing in the corner seemed to play a little softer. I watched from the shadows, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic beat of vindication. There it is. The point of no return. Harrison looked like he wanted to throttle her right there on the Persian rug. "You lying bitch." Victoria held up a single, manicured finger, silencing her son instantly. She stepped closer to Naomi. The older woman was shorter, but she seemed to tower over the trembling college student. Victoria's face was an unreadable mask, but I saw the slight tightening at the corners of her mouth. It wasn't shock. It was the thrill of a predator recognizing an easy kill. "A child," Victoria said softly. The word sounded dirty in her mouth. How quaint. "And you thought that bursting into a charitable foundation gala dressed like a discount streetwalker to announce this would result in what, exactly? A ring? A parade?" Naomi stepped back, the first true flicker of fear finally breaking through her arrogance. I just thought you should know. It's his. If it is his," Victoria replied smoothly, her voice barely a whisper but carrying a devastating weight. "Then it is Croft property. But you, Miss Miller, are not. You are an incubator." Victoria signaled subtly to two massive men in dark suits standing by the exits. "My lawyers will be in touch tomorrow morning," Victoria continued, her eyes locking onto Naomi's terrified face. "You will not contact my son again. You will not speak to the press. You will sign the non-disclosure agreements we provide, and if DNA confirms paternity, you will surrender the child upon birth for a sum we deem appropriate. If you deviate from this path even slightly, I will ensure that the rest of your life is an exercise in profound, inescapable misery." Naomi's jaw dropped. The color rushed from her cheeks, leaving her looking sickly and small. You can't do that. I'm the mother. I'm going to be his wife." Victoria let out a short, dry laugh that lacked any humor. "Wife? Oh, you poor, stupid creature. Did you really think you could trap us with biology? We buy and sell people with 10 times your pedigree before breakfast." The security guards flanked Naomi, one gripping her arm tightly enough to make her gasp. "Get her out the service elevator," Victoria commanded, turning her back on Naomi without another glance. "And have the carpets cleaned where she was standing." As Naomi was roughly dragged backward, her eyes wild, scanning the crowd in humiliation and terror, she caught sight of me standing by the floral arrangement. For a split second, our eyes locked. She looked at me, a silent, desperate plea for help. "Do something, Chloe." I held her gaze. I didn't flinch. I didn't step forward. I just slowly raised my glass of sparkling water, took a sip, and watched as the heavy doors closed, swallowing her whole. Naomi didn't come back to the dorm that night. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks, the oppressive weight of my past life's trauma finally beginning to lift from my chest. She dragged herself in at 7 a.m. on Saturday. The cherry-red sequin dress was torn at the hem, and she was clutching her cheap Chanel knockoff as if it were a life preserver. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks in jagged black tracks. She looked like a ghost that had been dragged through a hurricane. "They left me on the sidewalk," she whispered, her voice hoarse, staring blankly at the cinder block wall. "Security threw me out the service exit into an alley. My phone died. I had to walk to a diner and beg a waitress to let me call a cab. I didn't have any money to pay him when we got here. I had to give the driver my watch." I sat at my desk, sipping a hot cup of black coffee, watching her over the rim of my mug. "That sounds awful, Naomi. Harrison didn't even come after me, Chloe. He just stood there." She finally looked at me, her eyes bloodshot and frantic. "But it's just his mother. Victoria is a monster. She's manipulating him. Once he sees the ultrasound, once he realizes we're having a family, he'll stand up to her. He has to." I marveled at the sheer titanium strength of her denial. Even after being publicly humiliated and physically ejected, she still believed she was the star of a romantic comedy, just waiting for the third act apology in the rain. "I'm sure he will," I said smoothly, turning back to my laptop. I was in the middle of routing my personal files through a virtual private network utilizing military-grade encryption. In my past life, when the Crofts eventually came to clean up Naomi's mess, they had hacked my devices, erased my communications, and subtly threatened my future employers just for being in her proximity. This time, I was a digital fortress. I had audio recordings of Naomi confirming her intentions to trap Harrison, safely stored on an offshore server. If the Crofts looked my way, they would find absolutely nothing to use against me. A sharp, authoritative knock at our dorm room door shattered the morning silence. It wasn't the tentative rap of an RA or a fellow student. It was the heavy, rhythmic knock of law enforcement, or something worse. Naomi jumped, a spark of desperate hope igniting in her eyes. "It's him. It's Harrison." I knew he wouldn't let it end like this. She scrambled to the door, not even bothering to wipe the mascara from her face, and yanked it open. It wasn't Harrison. Standing in the hallway were 3 men. 2 of them were massive, built like linebackers, wearing charcoal suits that poorly concealed the tactical holsters beneath their jackets. They had the cold, dead-eyed stares of ex-military private contractors. The third man was older, sharp, and lean like a greyhound, carrying a black leather briefcase. "Naomi Miller?" the older man asked. His voice was polite, perfectly modulated, but carried the warmth of a morgue slab. "Yes?" Naomi stammered, shrinking back. "My name is Sterling. I am chief legal counsel for the Croft family estate." He stepped into the room. Without waiting for an invitation, the 2 behemoths followed, immediately closing the door behind them and locking it. The cramped dorm room suddenly felt starved of oxygen. Sterling placed his briefcase on Naomi's unmade bed and clicked the brass locks open. He withdrew a thick stack of documents, bound in heavy blue cardstock. Miss Miller, I am here to present you with a series of legally binding agreements drafted overnight. I strongly suggest you sit down. I'm not signing anything until I speak to Harrison. Naomi shrilled, panic finally breaking through her delusion. You can't force me. One of the security men shifted his weight slightly, crossing his arms. It was a microscopic movement, but it radiated pure violence. Naomi dropped onto her desk chair, trembling. Mr. Croft has no interest in speaking with you, now or ever, Sterling said, placing a gold Mont Blanc pen next to the papers. Let me explain your reality, Miss Miller. Page 1 is a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. You will never speak the name Croft in public or private again. Page 12 is a medical directive. You will be relocated to a private, secure medical facility in Vermont for the duration of your pregnancy. You will not receive prenatal care from anyone outside of our approved network. Naomi gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Vermont? But my classes! My life is here! Sterling ignored her. Page 32 is a surrender of parental rights, effective immediately upon the birth of the child, provided DNA testing confirms Mr. Croft's paternity. In exchange for your absolute compliance, you will receive a one-time payment of $2 million, placed in a blind trust, accessible only after the child is surrendered, and you have relocated out of the New England area. $2 million. To a college student drowning in credit card debt, it sounded like a fortune. To the Crofts, it was pocket change used to flush away a parasite. And if I refuse? Naomi whispered, tears finally spilling over her lashes. What if I keep my baby? Sterling leaned forward, resting his palms on the papers. The polite veneer vanished, revealing the ruthless corporate predator beneath. If you refuse, Miss Miller, we will bury you. We will file civil suits for harassment, extortion, and trespassing. We will ensure that every penny you or your family has is drained in legal fees before you ever see the inside of a courtroom. We have already contacted the dean of this university. Your academic standing is currently under review due to alleged honor code violations. And should you manage to birth this child, we will petition the family court for full custody, citing your financial instability, your crippling debt, and your deteriorating mental health. You will lose. You will walk away with nothing. No child, no money, and a destroyed reputation. Sterling paused, letting the silence suffocate her. Sign the papers, Naomi. Take the money. Disappear. Naomi looked at the pen. She looked at the giant men blocking the door. Then, she looked at me. I was sitting perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my face a mask of polite, terrified shock. I gave her a tiny, helpless shake of my head, playing the role of the paralyzed best friend perfectly. I knew she had no choice. She had kicked a sleeping dragon, and now she was being swallowed whole. With a trembling hand, she picked up the pen. Her tears hit the heavy paper as she signed her name, page after page, signing away her freedom, her child, and her future. Excellent, Sterling said briskly, gathering the documents the moment she finished. Pack a small bag. Only essentials. The transport vehicle is waiting downstairs to take you to the Vermont facility. Your phone and laptop will be confiscated to ensure no breaches of the NDA. Now? Naomi sobbed, clutching her stomach. I can't just leave. Chloe, tell them I can't just leave. I stood up, taking a tentative step forward, careful to look appropriately intimidated by the security guards. Naomi, I think you have to do what they say. I'll pack up the rest of your things for you. Sterling gave me a brief, dismissive glance, categorizing me as a non-threat. A wise friend. I suggest you forget you ever saw us. 10 minutes later, Naomi was escorted out of the room, clutching a duffel bag, looking like a prisoner of war being marched to a black site. She didn't look back at me. When the door clicked shut, I walked over to the window. I watched as the two men ushered her into the back of a black, armored SUV with tinted windows idling on Commonwealth Avenue. The SUV pulled away, blending into the Boston traffic. I took a deep breath, savoring the quiet of the empty room. My timeline was officially secure. 7 months later, my life was unrecognizable from the nightmare I had lived in my first timeline. Without Naomi's constant, draining crises anchoring me down, my trajectory had been flawless. I secured the summer analyst position at State Street Corporation, one of the premier financial institutions in Boston. I worked 80-hour weeks, my mind sharp and unburdened. My superiors noticed my ruthless efficiency and my ability to anticipate market shifts. By November, I was already fielding early offers for a post-graduation executive track. I had moved into a beautiful, sunlit apartment in Beacon Hill. My bank accounts were growing, my network was expanding, and the phantom pain in my spine from the marble stairs had entirely faded. As for Naomi, she had become a ghost. I received exactly one communication regarding her. It was a heavy, cream-colored envelope delivered to my office by a private courier. Inside was a single embossed card inviting me to a private viewing at a luxury high-rise in the Seaport District. It was signed by Victoria Croft's executive assistant. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. Victoria wanted an audience, and she was using Naomi as the exhibit. I arrived at the address on a dreary Tuesday afternoon. The building was a monolith of glass and steel. The concierge didn't ask for my name. He simply pressed a button that sent the private elevator shooting directly up to the penthouse floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a chillingly beautiful prison. The penthouse was massive, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gray harbor. But it felt sterile. There were no personal touches, no photos, no books, no clutter. It looked like a high-end waiting room. Standing by the window, her back to me, was Naomi. She turned slowly as I walked in. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop my expression from slipping. She was heavily, uncomfortably pregnant, carrying the Croft air in her swollen belly. But the physical toll was nothing compared to the light that had been extinguished in her eyes. She looked hollowed out. Her blonde hair, once her pride and joy, hung limp and unstyled. She wore plain, oversized gray cashmere loungewear. The manic, greedy energy that used to radiate from her was entirely gone, replaced by a suffocating, deeply ingrained paranoia. "Chloe," she rasped. Her voice sounded rusty from disuse. "Naomi?" I replied smoothly, keeping my distance. "You look well taken care of." A bitter, broken laugh escaped her lips. She gestured around the multi-million-dollar apartment. "Taken care of. Yes. That's one word for it." From the shadows of the hallway, a man stepped forward. He was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, with a stoic, unreadable face. He didn't introduce himself, but I knew his type. He was a handler. "You have 20 minutes, miss," the man said to me, his voice a low rumble. He crossed his arms and remained standing in the room, making it clear we would have no privacy. Naomi flinched at the sound of his voice. She shuffled over to a stark white sofa and sank into it. "They watch me, Chloe. Every second. There are cameras in every room except the bathroom. I don't have a phone, I have no internet access. The television only plays pre-approved channels. I haven't spoken to my mother in 6 months. It's for the safety of the baby," I said, my voice projecting a tone of mild, polite sympathy, entirely for the benefit of the handler. "You have to understand their perspective. The Crofts are very protective of their legacy." Naomi looked at me, a flicker of genuine hatred breaking through her exhaustion. "You don't understand. I'm a prisoner here. Victoria comes by once a week with a team of doctors. They don't speak to me. They speak over me. They measure my stomach, take my blood, and adjust my diet. I'm not a person to them. I'm a piece of livestock. You signed the contract, Naomi." I reminded her gently, the words carrying a hidden razor-sharp edge. "You chose this." "I didn't know it would be like this," she hissed. tears welling in her eyes. Harrison hasn't visited once. Not once, Chloe. He's engaged to a shipping heiress. I saw it on the news before they blocked the channel. He's getting married while I'm locked in this glass box carrying his son. I felt a cold wave of satisfaction wash over me. She had wanted to trap a billionaire. She had wanted the money, the status, the effortless luxury. She had willingly stepped into the lion's den, entirely convinced she could domesticate the beasts. Now, she was experiencing the brutal, systemic accountability that came with trying to play a game she didn't understand against people who wrote the rules. Once the baby is born, it will be over, I said. My voice a soothing hum. You'll get your money. You can start over somewhere else. Somewhere far away. I don't want the money anymore, she whispered, a tear finally tracking down her pale cheek. She rubbed her swollen stomach. A gesture of desperate, doomed maternal instinct. They're going to take him from me the second he takes his first breath. I know it, Victoria told me. She said I won't even be allowed to hold him. I looked down at her. In my past life, this was the exact moment my heart would have broken for her. I would have hatched a reckless, dangerous plan to smuggle her out, risking my own life and career to save her from the consequences of her own blinding greed. And my reward for that loyalty had been a shattered skull at the bottom of a marble staircase. I felt absolutely nothing for her now. I'm sorry, Naomi. I lied flawlessly, checking the delicate silver watch on my wrist. But you're a survivor. You'll figure it out. Time is up, the handler announced, stepping forward. Naomi reached out, grabbing my hand with a cold, desperate grip. Chloe, please. You have to help me. You work in finance now. You know people. You can find a lawyer. You can help me get out of here. We used to be best friends. I looked down at her hand clutching mine. I gently, but firmly, pried her fingers off my wrist. We were roommates, Naomi. I corrected her quietly, ensuring the handler didn't hear the frost in my tone. And I'm late for a meeting. Goodbye. I turned on my heel and walked toward the private elevator. I didn't look back as her sobs echoed against the floor-to-ceiling glass, trapped inside the multi-million-dollar cage she had built for herself. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sound entirely. I smoothed my skirt, fixed my posture, and prepared to conquer the rest of my day. I had an empire to build. The crisp, unforgiving Boston winter arrived, bringing with it the climax of Naomi's self-inflicted tragedy. By late January, I was deeply entrenched in my role at State Street Corporation. I had aligned myself with Richard Hawthorne, a senior managing director, who managed the portfolios of New England's oldest, most terrifyingly wealthy families. Because of my proximity to Richard, I had access to a steady stream of high society whispers. In the world of finance, gossip wasn't just idle chatter. It was actionable intelligence. That was how I knew the exact day Naomi went into labor. It was a Tuesday morning. Richard was reviewing a quarterly tax strategy on his monitor when he paused, adjusting his reading glasses. Well, it seems the Croft Family Trust just triggered an automatic 8-figure disbursement. A new generation. He sounded entirely bored by the prospect of a new human life. Harrison Croft officially has a son. And a mother to pay off, it seems. My fingers froze over my keyboard. Is that so? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Yes. Delivered at the Kensington Medical Pavilion at 4 a.m., Richard replied, already clicking away from the alert. Victoria Croft moved $3 million from a Cayman holding account to a blind domestic trust yesterday. Standard extraction protocol for their indiscretions. $3 million. They had bumped the payout up from 2. Perhaps it was a bonus for producing a healthy male heir. Or perhaps it was hush money for whatever psychological damage they had inflicted on her during the 3rd trimester. When my lunch hour hit, I didn't go to the corporate cafeteria. Instead, I hailed a black car and gave the driver the address for the Kensington Medical Pavilion. I didn't intend to go inside. I just needed to see it. I needed closure on the ghost of my past life. The Kensington wasn't a standard hospital. It was a private, fortress-like facility in Brookline catering exclusively to billionaires, celebrities, and politicians. The building was constructed of sleek, featureless white stone, surrounded by a wrought iron fence and dense, manicured privacy hedges. I stood across the street, the collar of my wool trench coat pulled up against the biting wind, nursing a black coffee. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the heavy glass doors of the pavilion slid open. A team of 4 private security contractors marched out, flanking a sleek, medical-grade transport incubator. Inside the glass box was a tiny, swaddled form. Walking directly behind the incubator was Victoria Croft. She wore a pristine white cashmere coat, her face a mask of triumphant, terrifying serenity. She didn't look back. She climbed into the back of an idling Rolls-Royce. The incubator was carefully secured in a separate, customized SUV, and the convoy glided away into the gray afternoon. 10 minutes later, the doors opened again. This time there was no entourage. 2 low-level hospital administrators physically guided a woman in a wheelchair toward the curb. It was Naomi. She looked small, fragile, and utterly broken. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes vacant, staring fixedly at her empty lap. She was wearing the same gray loungewear she had been wearing in the penthouse. They had literally taken the baby from her arms the moment the umbilical cord was cut. The doctors had stitched her up, pumped her full of painkillers, and rolled her out to the curb like a discharged patient who couldn't pay her bill. Sterling, the Croft family's merciless lawyer, stepped out of the shadows near the entrance. He didn't offer her a hand or a word of comfort. He simply placed a thick manila envelope onto her lap. Inside was the paperwork for her blind trust and a one-way first-class ticket out of Massachusetts. "The vehicle will take you to Logan Airport, Miss Miller," I heard Sterling say, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "Your belongings have already been shipped to the address you provided in Florida. Do not attempt to return to Boston. Do not attempt to contact the boy. This transaction is concluded." A black town car pulled up. The administrators helped a numb, weeping Naomi into the back seat. She didn't fight them. She didn't scream for her son. She just moved like an automaton, entirely drained of her humanity. She clutched the envelope to her chest, $3 million in exchange for a lifetime of trauma. As the car pulled away, I took a slow, deep breath. The icy air filled my lungs, and for the first time since waking up in that dorm room, I felt entirely, perfectly safe. I turned around, tossed my empty coffee cup into a nearby bin, and walked back to the financial district. I had a portfolio to manage. 14 months later, my life was a testament to the power of systemic accountability. I had been promoted to Associate Vice President at State Street, a title rarely handed to someone under the age of 30. I was managing multi-million-dollar tech acquisitions and sitting across the table from the very types of men Naomi had tried to trap. The difference was, I commanded their respect, and I held the keys to their capital. I bought a sprawling loft in the Seaport District, overlooking the harbor. My spine was perfectly intact, and my future was bulletproof. As for Naomi, her $3 million did exactly what Victoria Croft knew it would do. It destroyed her. I kept loose tabs on her through discreet background checks, a perk of working in high-level finance. When a person with zero financial literacy, no college degree, and profound, unhealed trauma suddenly gains access to a 7-figure blind trust, they don't invest in index funds. They try to buy the life they feel they were robbed of. Naomi had moved to Miami. She bought a waterfront condo she couldn't afford to maintain. She bought a cherry red Porsche to replace the cheap sequin dress. She surrounded herself with leeches, promoters, fake influencers, and con artists who smelled the fresh money on her like sharks smelling blood in the water. She tried to live like a billionaire's wife without the billionaire. Within a year, she was the victim of a massive cryptocurrency rug pull orchestrated by a man she was dating. By month 14, the trust was drained, the condo was in foreclosure, and the Porsche had been repossessed. I knew the exact moment she hit rock bottom, because she showed up at my office. It was a rainy Thursday evening. I was walking out of the gleaming glass lobby of the State Street building, my umbrella open, when a figure stepped out from the shadows of a nearby parking garage. Chloe. I stopped. The woman standing before me was a ghost of the girl I once knew. Naomi was dangerously thin, her blonde hair brittle and dark at the roots. She was wearing a cheap, rain-soaked trench coat and shivering violently. The manic arrogance was gone, replaced by the desperate, feral look of a cornered animal. "Naomi?" I said smoothly, keeping my distance. I casually slipped my hand into my designer handbag, my thumb resting over the canister of pepper spray I always carried. "You're violating your NDA just by being in this city. If the Crofts find out you're here, they'll freeze whatever pennies you have left." "I don't have any pennies left," she sobbed, taking a step forward. I didn't move. "It's all gone, Chloe. Everything. My money. My condo. My son." "You made your choices, Naomi." "You knew!" She screamed suddenly, her voice echoing off the wet concrete. Passersby briefly turned their heads before hurrying away into the rain. "You knew what they were like. You knew Harrison was a monster, and you knew his mother was a psychopath. Why didn't you warn me? In college, you were my best friend. You were supposed to protect me." I looked at her. Truly looked at her. I saw the girl who had shoved me down a flight of marble stairs because she couldn't handle her own failures. I saw the girl who was perfectly willing to use a child as a hostage to secure a black card. "Protect you?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, deadly calm. I stepped closer to her, the rain drumming a steady beat against my umbrella. "Do you remember the night you found out you were pregnant, Naomi? You didn't come to me scared. You came to me triumphant. You thought you had won the lottery." "I was young. I was stupid," she cried, wiping her nose with the back of her trembling hand. "You were greedy," I corrected her coldly. "You wanted a shortcut. You wanted the penthouses and the galas, and you didn't care who you had to step on or what you had to do to get them. If I had warned you, if I had begged you to get an abortion or run away, would you have listened?" Naomi opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She knew the truth. "No," I answered for her. "You would have called me jealous. You would have accused me of trying to sabotage your golden ticket. You would have hated me for it. You would have killed me for it. But you're rich now," she pleaded, changing tactics, her eyes darting to my expensive coat and my leather bag. "I see you on LinkedIn. You're a VP. You have money, Chloe. You could help me. Just a loan. Just $50,000 to help me get back on my feet and hire a lawyer. I want to sue the Crofts. I want my baby back." I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Sue the Crofts? With what leverage? You signed away your rights in front of their lawyers. You took their money and blew it. If you try to sue them, Victoria will have you committed to a psychiatric ward before the ink is dry on the filing. And as for my money," I leaned in, my voice devoid of any warmth or pity. "I earned my money, Naomi. I worked 80-hour weeks. I built a career. I didn't try to spread my legs to secure my future. I owe you absolutely nothing." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "You're a monster," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "You're just as cold as they are." "No," I replied, turning my back on her and stepping toward my waiting black car. "I'm just the girl who finally learned how the world actually works. Have a safe flight back to Miami, Naomi. Assuming you can afford the ticket." I slid into the plush leather seat of the car, closed the door, and told the driver to take me home. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked out the tinted window. Naomi was standing alone in the pouring rain, a hollow shell of a woman, screaming silently into the void. She had wanted to be a part of the 1%. Now, she was just another statistic. But my story, my rebirth was far from over. Because while Naomi was busy destroying herself, I had quietly been purchasing heavily discounted, high-yield debt from a failing subsidiary of Croft Industries. Victoria Croft thought she was the apex predator of Boston. She was about to find out that a new player had just bought a controlling interest in her hunting grounds. 3 years. That is exactly how long it takes to quietly build a guillotine. By my 27th birthday, I was no longer just an associate vice president. I had launched my own boutique private equity firm, Apex Capital Management, taking Richard Hawthorne with me as a silent partner. I was moving billions in assets across the eastern seaboard. To navigate these shark-infested waters, I didn't just rely on bulletproof contracts. My personal security detail was headed by former military contractors, and my constant companion was a retired Navy SEAL-trained German Shepherd named Titan. He was a 70-pound mass of muscle and tactical discipline who slept under my mahogany desk and could smell a spike in a liar's cortisol levels before I could. While I was building my fortress, Croft Industries was beginning to bleed. Victoria Croft's arrogance was her fatal flaw. Believing her family's legacy was untouchable, she heavily over-leveraged Croft Development, their flagship real estate arm, to fund a colossal $3 billion luxury residential project in the Seaport District. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of Boston. But supply chain disruptions, zoning lawsuits, and a sudden dip in the luxury market caused construction to stall. They were hemorrhaging cash. To keep the project afloat and hide their vulnerability from their shareholders, Victoria and Harrison quietly took out hundreds of millions in high-yield, short-term mezzanine debt from a secondary lender. Over the course of 18 months, using dummy corporations and offshore holding companies, Apex Capital bought every single cent of that debt. I became the invisible chain around Victoria Croft's neck, and on a freezing Tuesday in November, I decided to pull it tight. I called in the loans. The default notices were delivered by armed couriers to the Croft corporate headquarters. The terms were ironclad: immediate payment in full, or the forfeiture of all Croft Development assets, including their historic flagship properties across Manhattan and Boston, to the debt holder. A massive restructuring meeting was immediately convened in the glass-walled boardroom of the Croft Tower. They didn't know who the majority stakeholder was. My dummy corporations had shielded my identity perfectly. I arrived 10 minutes late, letting them sweat. When the heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open, the room went dead silent. Victoria Croft sat at the head of the long obsidian table, flanked by Harrison and their attack dog lawyer, Sterling. They looked exhausted. Harrison had aged 10 years, the lazy arrogance wiped from his face, replaced by the frantic sheen of a cornered man. I walked in, the heels of my Louboutins clicking sharply against the marble floor. Titan walked in perfect lockstep at my left thigh, his dark eyes scanning the room, assessing every person as a potential threat. Victoria's eyes narrowed, failing to place me at first. I was no longer the mousy college student in a consignment slip dress standing behind a floral arrangement. I wore a tailored, charcoal Tom Ford suit, a Patek Philippe watch, and the icy, unbothered expression of a woman who held their entire world in the palm of her hand. "This is a closed executive session," Harrison snapped, standing up, his voice cracking slightly. "Security! Get this woman and her animal out of here!" I smiled, a slow, terrifying curve of the lips. I walked to the empty leather chair at the opposite end of the table and sat down. Titan immediately dropped into a silent, alert downstay beside me. "Sit down, Harrison," I said softly. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Sterling's face suddenly went entirely pale, as his photographic memory finally matched my face to the girl in the college dorm room 5 years ago. He leaned in, whispering urgently into Victoria's ear. I watched Victoria Croft, the untouchable matriarch, experience the exact moment her empire cracked. Her aristocratic features slackened in sheer, unadulterated shock. "You," Victoria breathed, the word barely escaping her throat. "Chloe, the roommate, CEO and founder of Apex Capital." I corrected her smoothly, tossing a thick, leather-bound dossier onto the center of the table. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, the owner of $650 million of your defaulted debt." Harrison dropped back into his chair as if he had been shot. No. That's impossible. You were a nobody. You were living in a dorm. I was paying attention, I replied, my voice echoing off the glass walls. While you were busy ruining a desperate girl's life and buying your way out of accountability, I was studying your financials. Croft Development is insolvent, Victoria. You hid the losses from your board, you lied on your quarterly filings, and your credit rating is about to be downgraded to junk status. You are finished. Victoria's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. She tried to summon the imperious, terrifying presence she had wielded at the gala all those years ago, but she had no ammunition left. What do you want? She hissed. You want a payout? Is that it? Are you here to extort us for what we did to your little friend? Naomi Miller stopped being my friend the day she tried to use a pregnancy as a blackmail tool, I said coldly, leaning forward. This isn't about her. This is about systemic accountability. For decades, your family has operated under the delusion that you can buy, sell, and destroy people without consequence. You thought you were the apex predators. I reached down, lightly resting my hand on Titan's broad head. You're not. You're just prey that hasn't been hunted yet. The dismantling of the Croft family was not a swift execution. It was a slow, agonizing public vivisection. I didn't just want their money. I wanted their absolute ruin. Here are my terms, I announced to the silent boardroom. Apex Capital is executing a hostile takeover of Croft Development. I will absorb your viable assets to satisfy the debt. The Seaport project will be transferred entirely to my control. Furthermore, Victoria, you will step down as CEO of Croft Industries, effective at the close of the market today. If you attempt to fight this, I will release the dossier containing proof of Harrison's fraudulent wire transfers used to hide your insolvency to the SEC and the Department of Justice. Harrison won't just lose his trust fund. He will go to federal prison. Harrison let out a choked, panicked noise. He looked at his mother, his eyes wide with terror. Mother, you can't. We have to fight her. Sterling, tell her we can fight. Sterling slowly closed his briefcase. He looked at Victoria, his face a mask of grim resignation. The contracts are ironclad, Mr. Croft. The fraud evidence is substantial. If we litigate, we trigger a federal investigation. Miss, the CEO has us in checkmate. Even their loyal fixer knew when the ship was going down. Victoria Croft stared at me, a lifetime of elitist supremacy shattering behind her eyes. She was an old, tired woman who had finally run out of pawns to sacrifice. We buy and sell people with 10 times your pedigree before breakfast, I whispered, repeating the exact words she had used to destroy Naomi, letting the poetic justice hang heavy in the sterile air of the boardroom. Sign the papers, Victoria, or I make the call. It took 2 hours of frantic, whispered legal consultations, but by noon, the Croft empire had officially changed hands. Victoria signed the forfeiture agreements with a violently trembling hand. Harrison sat in the corner, his face buried in his palms, quietly sobbing as his billion-dollar inheritance evaporated into the ether. When the news hit the financial wires that afternoon, the shockwave was catastrophic. Croft Industries stock plummeted by 40% in a single hour. Victoria's forced resignation fueled massive speculation. Harrison's fiancée, the shipping heiress, publicly broke their engagement the following morning, unwilling to tie herself to a sinking ship with zero liquidity. Over the next 6 months, the high society world that had once worshipped the Crofts turned its back on them. They were forced to liquidate their personal assets, the penthouse, the yachts, the private jets, just to settle the secondary lawsuits from angry shareholders. Victoria suffered a minor stroke from the stress and retreated to a modest, heavily mortgaged property in Connecticut, living in complete social isolation. Harrison, terrified of the impending SEC audits, fled to a non-extradition country, living off whatever cash he could smuggle out in a duffel bag. As for the child, the Croft heir, when the family trust was audited and subsequently frozen during the liquidation, the exorbitant funds allocated for the boy's private care dried up. The child was eventually placed in the custody of a distant, estranged aunt in upstate New York, far removed from the toxic, manipulative grip of Victoria Croft. He would grow up normal, He would never know the monstrous legacy he had been born to inherit. And Naomi? I had one final update on her. A private investigator I kept on retainer sent me a single photograph. It was taken outside a strip mall in Fort Lauderdale. Naomi was 26 years old, wearing the polyester uniform of a discount cellular provider, smoking a cigarette on her lunch break. She looked exhausted, prematurely aged, staring blankly at the hot Florida asphalt. She was no longer a victim, nor a villain. She was simply irrelevant. I deleted the photo and permanently closed her file. On a bright, freezing morning in late December, I stood on the top floor of the newly completed Apex Tower in the Seaport District. It was the exact building the Crofts had bankrupted themselves trying to build. Now, my name was on the deed. I looked down at the sprawling, icy city of Boston. Titan sat faithfully by my side, a silent guardian. I reached up and touched the back of my head, right where my skull had shattered against the cold marble in another lifetime. There was no scar. There was no phantom pain. I had been given a second chance, pushed to the edge of the abyss by a friend's violent greed. But I didn't fall. I grew wings forged in ice and ambition, and I flew back up to drag the monsters down. I didn't stop my roommate from trying to trap a billionaire. I let her walk into the fire, and then I bought the ashes. That is the absolute, ruthless power of a second chance. Chloe didn't just survive her rebirth. She completely flipped the chessboard and became the apex predator, delivering the ultimate karma to the very people who thought they were untouchable. If this story of high-stakes corporate revenge, tactical precision, and systemic accountability had your heart pounding, you need to hit that like button right now. Share this video with anyone who loves a brilliant plot twist where the underestimated underdog completely destroys the elite villains. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next deep dive into stories where the villains finally get exactly what they deserve. Drop a comment below. What was the most satisfying moment of Chloe's revenge for you? See you in the next one.